Hi, welcome to this web series exploring abandoned towns of Montana's past. In other words, ghost towns. All of the places we'll talk about have interesting or notable histories, but not all are available for visits. We're starting with Aldridge, Montana. Aldridge, Montana was in the southwest near Gardner in Park County. The remains are on private property, and therefore you cannot visit the town. Aldridge and its sister town, Horr, began life as mining camps. Aldridge sits 2 miles north of the Yellowstone entrance, and Horr would later become known as Electric. Coal veins run through the upper Yellowstone Basin, and early prospectors knew about these veins since the 1860s. A mining company was granted mining rights in the 60s, but there were no wagon trails, trains, or infrastructure in the area to support mining, so it wasn't until the 80s that ore was established. This photo shows the coke ovens in 1884. The Devil's Slide is just visible in the background. Other towns were also springing up in the area, including Cinnabar, Gardner, and Jardine. For reference, Yellowstone National Park was established on March 1, 1872. This photo is of the Valley of Cinnabar from 1883 by photographer Carlton Watkins. At the time, the railroad to Yellowstone ended here. In 1883, the Horr brothers claimed discovery of the coal veins and established the Horr Coal Mining Company. The town of Horr was established in 1887 by the younger brother, Harry. The brothers never worked the mines, but leased the mining operations to the Park Coal Company. In October 1887, the first train cars of coal arrived in Livingston. The coal of the area was considered better quality and more plentiful than elsewhere in Montana. Horr was the headquarters of the mining company and home of the coke ovens, the managers, engineers, and their families. As mining operations picked up, new veins were discovered, including vein number 7 in 1892, that was near the unnamed nearby lake. A mining camp was established at the lake. This camp became Aldridge in 1896. Horr in turn became the smaller of the two towns, and in 1900, after a power plant was built, the town adopted the name Electric. In 1895, nearing bankruptcy and with one of the managers under investigation for fraud, the Park Coal Company folded, and the Horr brothers sold off their investments. During this time, mining stopped for close to a year, but resumed in 1896 when the Montana Coal and Coke Company took over. Aldridge and Electric were 2 miles apart as the crow flies, and the 2,000-foot elevation difference. The first road connecting the two wound along the Mulherron Creek and turned the 2-mile trek into an 8-mile journey. In 1896, a road was completed, cutting this route down to 2.5 miles. It started at the Devil's Slide. In the beginning, coal was transported from Aldridge to Electric by mule, then by flume. A tram between the two towns was constructed, and later an aerial tram. This photo shows the mule skinners, who had larger lamps on their helmets than those of regular miners. They led the mules in and out of the mines. The tram took passengers between the two locations until 1904, when a woman was killed by falling rocks while riding the tram. The coroner found the mining company guilty of negligence for not ensuring the route was secure. The mining company changed the rules on who could ride the tram and made it much more difficult for anyone to just hop on board. Photographed here is an official of the company, his wife, and nephew as they made their way towards Aldridge around 1901. Aldridge wasn't a planned town. Wherever the land was flat enough, houses were built. Aldridge became a town with little pockets and named neighborhoods, such as up above the mine, the lake shore, on the tram route, down camp, and below the store. This photo is of the neighborhood of Happy Hollow. The miners were predominantly Austrian and Welsh. The coke pullers who worked the ovens in Electric were mostly Italian and Sicilian. The miners on average made $2.75 a day, while the coke pullers could make up to $3 a day. Pullers were paid by the amount of ovens they turned over in a day, and a puller could do 3. Miners were paid by the time working. Boys could be employed as miners as young as 16. Like many mining operations, there were some environmental impacts to the work done near Aldridge. Wastewater was funneled into Aldridge Lake, and some seeped into the Yellowstone, causing fish to die. In July 1898, a reservoir was completed for collecting wastewater to keep it from running into the main river. This photo is of the Yellowstone River, about 10 miles southeast of Livingston in 1871. On March 3, 1906, the Livingston Enterprise reported that the Yellowstone River is now in a condition of inky blackness, owing to the dumping of coal slack into it from the Aldridge mines and washery. Tuesday, the water in the city mains of Livingston was filled with sediment, and where it was allowed to stand overnight, the bottoms of basins were covered with a thick coat of slime and sediment. In 1889, the coal company produced 50 tons of coal and iron ore daily. In 1896, 650 cars of coal were mined a day. In 1901, the company was operating 256 coking ovens. It was the largest coal and iron ore producing company in the western United States. This is the mine, probably in the last few years of its operation. The lines of the aerial tram can be seen on the left. Aldridge wasn't immune to the many labor disputes that occurred elsewhere during this time. The first strike happened in 1895 when the miners marched from the lake camp to the company headquarters in Horr. The general manager ordered every man fired. This strike lasted less than a week. This photo is of the Aldridge Union, taken in either 1896 or 97. In 1896, W.H. Aldridge, the director of the Montana Coke and Coke Company and the general manager of the East Helena smelters, was summoned to Aldridge to settle a dispute. The miners named the lake and the camp at the lake Aldridge, but the town wouldn't go on record as a town separate from Horr, with its own post office, until 1904. The man Aldridge never lived in the camp. This photo of Aldridge was taken between 1902 and 1904. The schoolhouse is the big white building on the hill to the left. On April 19, 1897, a union of miners was organized in Aldridge. The company refused to hire union men. This strike lasted until July, when the company finally agreed to hire unionized workers. For the most part, the union and the company got on well together. It wasn't until 1904 that things fell apart. This photo is of miners who worked the No. 4 drift in Aldridge. On August 23, 1904, the union and the company were out of sorts. They couldn't renegotiate a contract. The company closed the mines preemptively ahead of a predicted strike. They believed the laborers were going to ask for a wage increase. The miners retorted that their demands were for better working conditions, not more money. Everyone suspected that the closures would be short and people would resume working soon. As the strike carried on, some men left to find work elsewhere, but the town was still alive and bustling. After all, a new school had just opened up. The strike lasted longer than anyone predicted, and was peaceful. In March of 1905, scabs were brought in and the company continued expanding buildings and working on other projects, but not mining. In April, the last saloon left open closed. In May, an agreement was made and workers returned to Aldridge. In July, the strike started again and lasted until August 19th. When mining resumed, some businesses came back, but for most part, the boom in Aldridge was over. This photo is of Union men of electric in procession during 1908. Aldridge was a pretty social town, with its own band, baseball team, and many picnics and events happening throughout the year. With Yellowstone just a few miles down the road, Aldridge saw many visitors and its residents enjoyed many recreation activities. This photo is of a group from Aldridge visiting nearby Yellowstone National Park in May 1904. The cavern, Devil's Kitchen, was open for tourists to explore until 1939. It was closed because the air was toxic. Aldridge Lake froze over winter and was a source of recreation in the town. Skating was a popular pastime, but in 1901, one young skater died in an accident. One winter, it froze in September and didn't thaw until May. It was dammed at the lower end. This photo of young skaters was taken around 1910. Aldridge attracted a great number of businesses. The company's store supplied many of the laborers and their families, but there were also other businesses moving in, including boarding houses, saloons, restaurants, seamstresses, haberdasheries, hotels, a butcher, and a company physician. Aldridge also attracted transient merchants that would come through town on paydays selling custom-made suits and jewelry. This photo is of the inside of the Piser's Bar in Electric in 1899. The bartender is Billy Jump. By 1896, Aldridge had become the center of businesses between the two towns. The first photo is of Jane Boucher and her father, John, in 1887. Jane visited her brother in Aldridge and met Frank Boutry, who had set up a shop in Aldridge. The Boutrys went on to found stores in Havre, which led to an empire of grocery stores across the Northwest and was eventually bought out by Albertsons in 1998. The other two photos are residents of Aldridge. The middle photo is of Maggie Callan in 1896, and the photo on the right is of attendees to the Sweet Pea Carnival in Bozeman in 1912, who were residents of Aldridge. After 15 years and constant financial struggles, the Montana Coal and Coke Company finally collapsed, and with it the towns of Aldridge and Electric were abandoned. Aldridge survived 15 years, and at its peak was home to 800 people, 400 of which were employed by the company. The company stretched itself too thin and lacked the finances to keep the operation going. They owed $40,000 to miners and $50,000 to investors when they folded. Some say that the aerial tram was one of the reasons for the dissolution of the company. The tram caused the coal to dry out and not coke properly. The installation costs of the tram were extremely excessive, and the trams caused many delays in mining due to frequent mechanical issues. The tram was supposed to reduce costs, though. After the mines at Aldridge closed, a Coke City mining president bought the tram and moved it to Clark's Fork. After the company packed up and left, the town stumbled along for a short time. The schools remained open and teaching until 1922, when the only students were 4 siblings. In 1933, the school district itself was abandoned and the area became incorporated into the Cinnabar School District, and later into Gardner. The schoolhouse stood until 1950, when it was destroyed and the lumber used for a ranch house. This photo shows the students and teachers of the 1900 to 1901 term. The homes of Aldridge were poorly built, often unpainted, and easily lost to the passage of time. There are some stone foundations remaining. Houses were put up rapidly due to a housing shortage in the camp in its first years, but the rapid construction meant rapid deterioration. Not much remains of Aldridge now. There are still deposits of coal in the area, but no active mining is taking place. This photo shows what remains of Happy Hollow in the 1960s. Today, little remains of the work that was done in Aldridge. Next month, we'll be taking a look at another interesting town in southwest Montana, Coolidge. If you want to know more about Aldridge, Montana, check out the book by Bill and Doris Whitthorne called A Photo History of Aldridge. It's available in several Gallatin County libraries. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.